the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Mauro, and with me today is a Mike, but it's a different Mike. We have Mike Bress.
Hey, Jen, how are you? I'm glad to be with you.
Very excited to be with you. This is the first time that we've done a podcast together.
Yep. It's a long time coming. Yes, it's a long time coming. And this is a good topic for us that we'll get to, but I'm excited to just have it be you and I leading the ship today for at least one episode.
I agree. For the audience who is familiar, usually we have Mike Walsh on as the Director of Communications, and Mike Bress is in the Communications and Marketing Manager for the Office of Catholic Education. So, Mike, you're usually on with Marianella and doing a lot of education things. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, usually my colleague, who's the Director of Enrollment for the Office of Catholic Education, Marianella, is usually my co-host, and she usually leads the ship, and I just jump in from time to time. And so it's nice that we're shifting the musical chairs of host a little bit today. Get some different flavor. Yeah, I think it's going to be great.
Me too. So what's been going on? We always chit chat for a few minutes at the beginning. Why don't you tell the listeners where you are? Now, hold on. I have to preface this. I'm sorry. Listeners, we are recording this on a Thursday morning at 11 via Zoom. And when I turned on my camera, Mike Bress, his background is, I don't know, there's 20 bottles of wine behind you. Like, he looks like he's at a winery. And I was immediately jealous. So Can you tell me what's going on? What are you doing on work hours at the winery?
Yeah, this is actually my basement of my home. It's a wonderful thing that's taken a few years to put together. But no, I am at the Cellar 32, I think is the official name, Cellar 32. It's a nice restaurant in Brigantine down in Atlantic County. I am at the principals meeting / end of year celebration. So every year we have the elementary school principals in for a all day, sort of half day affair, I guess, of a little bit of meeting, a little bit of business talk. We have a guest speaker upstairs who's talking to them right now. And then we have lunch and we award anyone that's retiring for the year. And then we just kind of celebrate the year, and even though we've got a few weeks left, everyone's ready to be done. So we might as well do it a couple of weeks ahead of time. And it just so happens that we are in an area where there's a lot of wine. So I'm interested to see a before and after picture when our principals leave, how much wine is actually left on the shelf behind me. So I think that'll be interesting as lunch kicks off. But it's a busy time as it is for all of us in the diocese. But last night we had our second of 2 job fairs for our schools, and it went very well. So I was down in this area last night, headed back up the AC Expressway, and then popped down again this morning. So I get a lot of love for the shore around this time of year, which there's not a really a worse place to be than in the down by the beach this time of year.
So how did the job fair go? Can you tell the listeners a little bit about the 2 job fairs you have, and if they missed it, how maybe they could still look into our jobs that we have available in our Catholic schools? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. So we sort of as a prompting from our principals, which we do a lot of our things from, based on the feedback that we get from our schools and especially our principals, was a need to kind of get the word out about positions that are available at our schools, especially teaching. Teaching sometimes is a fluid employment opportunity. And so we get these wonderful teachers for as long as we can, and then they do move on to other opportunities. And we want to, give that spot to someone who's ready to be with us in the faith and in Catholic education. So we put together 2 job fairs, one up in the high point of the diocese in the Camden County, Gloucester County area for those schools. And then last night we had one in the sort of other side of the diocese down in the Atlantic County area. We were at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Absecon, which was a beautiful hall and church. So it was great. We had probably 20 participants last night, all in different, mostly teachers, but of different positions, some teaching aides, secretaries, custodial staff, anything and everything we needed. They got a chance to meet some of our principals, talk about the jobs. And, I got to, as is my nature and as a marketer and the social media guy, I'm kind of hovering around, taking photos and listening to the conversations, and they were all very engaged. And I think, we found some, hopefully good candidates, and ideally, even, those who couldn't attend, as you mentioned, Jen, we're going to be posting jobs online as they come in. This is the time of year that unfortunately people make decisions to change professions. And so we tend to get those in from the schools as the school year ends, and we're going to be putting them out on social media. We're working on a web page to have them all listed in the same place. And then you can submit your resume to us, via our email address. It's catholicschools.public@camdendiocese.org. So you can always send in your resume if you're looking for something. We're building a bank of resumes, and then our principals will have access to it. They'll give these candidates a call. So there's a great opportunity just to learn about us, learn about them, and hopefully have an easier summer of bringing in new people into the Catholic school fold.
And for any listener who is interested in applying, you might have added perks that you don't know, such as being on a podcast in a basement full of wine.
Correct.
So I would say,
at the very least, at some point, you may have a bottle of wine behind you or in front of you. It's up to you what you choose. I'm like looking back and just seeing how I can grab one throughout the podcast and just put it on the table and evolve, and then I'm going to break it. But
Walsh will say that'll be the last time Jen and Mike Bress ever get to do a podcast together.
Of course, the one they do together, wine is involved somehow.
Of course,
yeah,
right. Well, talking about Catholic schools, we have an exciting podcast ahead of us here. We're going to be talking about the South Jersey Scholarship Fund. So I'm going to introduce our guests. With us today, we have a familiar face. This is Stacy Napolitano, who is the Associate Director of Major Gifts and Stewardship for the Office of Development. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Absolutely. And our guest, we have Christine Messina, and she's the Vice President of the Board of Trustees for the South Jersey Scholarship Fund. Hi, Christine.
Great to be with each of you. Thank you, Jen, for such a lovely introduction, and great to be with you, Mike and Stacy.
Well, thank you for making time for us today. And before we start the podcast, I have to give a shout out to Miss Stacy. It is her birthday today.
Happy! Well, let me get you a wine. Hang on a minute. Which one would you like?
Sure. We had to grab a bottle off the wall.
Yeah.
And we'll begin with a few bars of happy birthday.
There you go.
I'll just do a few. Happy birthday to you.
Aw.
Happy birthday to you. Mike?
Happy birthday, dear Stacy.
All the Zoom faces, it reminds me of the choirs during the pandemic,
Oh, definitely.
And I will say we're lucky that that's now a free domain, or Walsh would be upset because we would have to pay for that. So
That's right. Best practices. Well done, Mike.
Yeah.
I had to hit the third bar, which is once you get past the third bar, then you have to start paying for it. So I had to know if I was going to invest in it, that it was going to be.
Yeah. I'm glad we're keeping dollars in the classroom. That's what it's all about.
There you go.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about the South Jersey Scholarship Fund. Christine, can you explain a little bit about what the fund is and what it does?
Sure. So the South Jersey Scholarship Fund exists to provide tuition assistance to students and families who wish to have a Catholic school education within the South Jersey Scholarship Fund schools in the lower 7 counties. So really, we're there to be a bridge for the folks that want to provide this education, that want to keep Catholic values going as a part of that child's academic experience. And there is certainly a need. So it's our pleasure to do this work. It's so great to have a platform to talk a little bit more about it today, and we really appreciate that opportunity.
Stacy, how long have you been working with the South Jersey Scholarship Fund now?
Well, I've been with the diocese for just about 4 years. And right from the beginning, I started working with the South Jersey Scholarship Fund. At the time, Mary Ann Gilbride was development director, and she is a trustee of the board. So I looped in the beginning, helping with fundraisers for the fund.
That's such an eloquent way to say it, Stacy. I don't know if so much of it was a looping in as it was like a vacuum suction sound, like a
trial by
Stacey's
fire.
talent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here you go.
a little blend of volunteer and voluntold. So thank you,
Voluntold, yeah.
Stacy.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. And it's, the board is such a great group, and they're really all committed to helping make sure that everyone who wants to attend Catholic school is able to, that it's not a financial reason that they're not attending Catholic school. But there's a lot of work to be done. That's for sure.
Yeah. And on that point, if we can talk a little bit about that, and that need, sort of the genesis of that. I mean, I work every day in the office and know sort of the struggles that our parents have. And I have to do the marketing of saying, hey, write us a check so that your child can get, a Catholic education. So, where do you think that came from for the diocese? Why did you decide that we needed this fund to help the schools? I mean, we have obvious, we know there's obvious financial needs, but just specifically this fund, why was it important to get it started? And was there a specific turning point for the development office to have it?
The fund.
Sure. Go ahead, Stacy.
I know the fund began in 2001, so that was well before I began working with the diocese. However, I do know that the officers, the original officers who started the fund, just saw that there was such a large need, and they thought this is something that we can do to help in an additional way to the other forms of assistance that were available.
Christine, did you have something to add on that?
Sure. No, Mike, I think, you said it best, those conversations that happen from the administration to the parent level can be painful. There is that sentiment that that family is dividing their limited resources among groceries, gas bills, utility bills. And so wanting to alleviate that pressure for a family that doesn't want to make those tough choices between paying for an emergency medical bill versus that continuum of the Catholic school education. That's really, the inspiration for this is we don't want any family to feel that type of pressure and have to, close that door to the Catholic school education in order to keep their finances and keep their monthly bills going.
Yeah. And I mean, that's such a worthy cause for it, because I think that is the biggest crunch for a lot of our parents, is deciding, do I want my child needs an education, right? And I want them to have the best education. But there are other bills, and there's, and things come up, and we have and emergencies, right? And so having that outlet is fantastic. And, I've only been with the diocese almost 2 years now. And when I first learned about this fund, I thought it was just such a great cause to support, because, I was lucky enough to be a 12-year, Catholic education recipient or participant, and even into college. So I was lucky, to have that, and my parents could afford to send me. But, there were times where that wasn't always the case. And so I think that's great. On that, being that it's from 2001, do you know of any, we've talked about success stories, and we can talk about more recent success stories, but I was a graduate of the class of 2002. So this fund started roughly around when I was in school. Do you know of any recipients that have gone on to, careers or anything that, success stories because of their education and because of this fund?
I do know of a very recent alumni who allowed us to feature her last year, and she's a graduate of Paul VI High School and went on to college and then helped coach basketball and is in medical school now.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
Her father unfortunately passed away during the middle of her high school years. And she and her mother had said that if it weren't for the South Jersey Scholarship Fund, she probably would have had to leave Catholic school and not graduate with her friends. And who knows how that would have impacted where she went to college or the rest of her life.
Yeah, that's very true. And that it's so, unfortunately, that's so many of our stories, right? Something tragic happens in the middle their education, and they have to decide what to do. So that's a great one.
Christine, do you have any example?
I was just thinking back to, Mike saying that he had a Catholic higher education. So I just drifted off for a moment there and wanted to ask Mike, where did you graduate from college?
So I went to the powerhouse basketball school of a couple of years ago, St. Peter's College, which is now St. Peter's University. The only claim to fame in the last 10 years is that they were a Cinderella story in the NCAA, and they had me go to college there, which, it hasn't made the papers yet, but it's definitely something very strong that they have.
I was going to say, I thought that the latter was the bigger headline, graduating.
Eventually they'll erect the statue, but it's in progress. So it's a lot of financial, implications to build such a statue there. But no, and it's funny, we've talked about this in the office, and I won't go on about the experience too much, but I was kindergarten through 10th grade Catholic education. We moved to an area where there wasn't a Catholic school when I was a junior, so I had to go to public school for junior and senior year. And I jokingly say that because of that, I made my parents pay for 4 years of Catholic university education,
right.
as a punishment to them. But truthfully, those roots of that and that support, and seeing what that's taken me to here. It's a great story. And my kids are in it now, they're in Catholic school now, and I see the value of that and what it gives. I think, Stacy, you're right. The fact that there were 2 years where I didn't get that education. I had a very good education in public school, but, not having those 2 years and having that reason that could change a person's life, and sometimes not for the better. I luckily was able to go, through those years and then continue. And now I get to do it as a job. So I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, it's, I think we could talk about unfortunately, some of the horror stories of the tuition end, but the positive end is that she continued on. Right. And it was because of the fund. From a logistics standpoint, what happens with the fund? How does it get to the schools? What's the process from donation to, scholarship?
Well, when a donation comes in, it's deposited in the South Jersey Scholarship Fund account, and the bylaws specify that all donations have to be distributed within 2 years. So that means there's a quick turnaround to help students in need. And generally then each year, the diocese fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So at the end of the fiscal year, we wrap up the end of year fundraiser for the South Jersey Scholarship Fund, which right now is called the Spring Sprint for Scholarships. So we're in the sprint to let's get as many donations as we can to help out students for the 2023-24 school year. And then at that point, sometime in the summer, we give the Office of Catholic Schools a check for a certain amount of the funds that were raised, and then the schools distributes that. The school's office distributes that to all of the Catholic schools, and then the principals or administration decide which students are in need for the funds.
Now, Christine, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you became involved in the South Jersey Scholarship Fund and why you wanted to, be on the board and now serve as the vice president?
Sure, I would be happy to. So I grew up in the South Jersey area. I am among the first generation in my family to go to college. So so much of this podcast and this platform is about the power of storytelling. And in my grandfather's honor, I'm so pleased to share the story that he came here as an immigrant. He was 6 years old on a boat back in 1917, and came over with just his father. His mother had already passed in Italy. And by the time he was 14, he was orphaned and did not have the means of an education. He did not complete even his high school years. So he had an 8th grade education. And as so many immigrants had the experience, just had to make his own way in the world, performing labor jobs, enough, food on the table, didn't really have a family. Again, he was orphaned, didn't really have a family to speak of until he married my grandmother, Carmela, and that was to him his first sense of a family unit. Grandma Carmela, Grandpa Tom have 3 kids, my father being the middle child. And again, education was something that, certainly was important, but they did not have the means on my grandfather's factory labor salary to immediately go to college. So my father joined my grandfather on the factory line, and that was going to be his way of making a living, up until the point that somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're a young man, you've already got 2 mouths to feed. Would you like to learn a little bit about the cleaning industry? I run a cleaning company on the side." So my father, in addition to his factory work, took a second job learning the custodial and cleaning business. And that is where he was able to elevate himself, make more of a living, learn business from a mentor, and really gained his degree with on-the-job training. I was able to build a cleaning business that translated into a restoration business many years later. So all of that is to say, my father raised us with the goal of, I want my children to be the first generation to go to college, and education was so important. Dovetailed with the values he was raised with, which was, we might not have a lot of money, we might not have a lot of academic experience or degrees, but we have values that say, if I make $1, I want to be able to donate, 50 cents of that back to the community. And that's really how my grandfather operated. Whatever he had, he wanted to share. And that is a value that was instilled in my father, passed down to us as children. And so, a few generations later, I have the opportunity to go to college with a combination of student loans, as so many of my peers did. And there was a path lit for me because my parents, had taken a step up and very much wanted to make sure that this education was possible for us. Looking back on all this, my father always says, if not for a mentor, if not for somebody tapping me on the shoulder and showing me the way towards elevating myself, I wouldn't have had a pathway to do that. And I think that's the importance of these scholarship programs, is there are folks who that education will stop based on one barrier or another. And this scholarship fund exists to say, hold on, there is a way to navigate through this. These resources are available. And furthermore, this year, again, back to the power of storytelling, what's been really exciting for us is that in a casual business conversation that was taking place with Dr. Fred Keating of the Rowan College of South Jersey, he learned of my participation on the board, a fellow board member's participation, started to ask more questions, and then shared how much a Catholic school education shaped him. He's a proud, Dr. Fred Keating, proud alum of Camden Catholic, Hall of Fame basketball player. So when he learned that this scholarship fund existed, he cared so much to figure out how could Rowan College of South Jersey and the scholarship fund develop a relationship to continue to further illuminate that pathway. And Mike, that's why I asked where you went to college. You were able to go, through a Catholic education all the way through. And that was, the goal of this conversation between Dr. Fred Keating and our board was, how can we make that happen for the high school students as well?
Just to interrupt for a second, Christine, first off, the way you told that story was so beautiful, because I can, picture, your grandfather and then your father, going to work and, like you said, the factory line. And I just have to say, I'm sure that your grandfather would be super proud, because to be able to come from where he came from and build himself up, and now you being a first generation to go to college, he would be thrilled. I can only imagine, That's
Thank you.
I'm going to confess that it's a little dusty in this wine cellar, because that was a very moving story. And I guess, for you, you better get to college, because there's a lot of conversations at Thanksgiving, right? About
That's right.
hard work. And,
That's right. I said more important than graduating with a degree was graduating with a job.
Yeah.
So it was happy graduation and get to work.
Get to work.
There was no rest, right? Your dad, your father, and everybody's like, just get to it.
There was not. If to share a quick anecdote, and this really was self-motivated. And thank you, because after all these years, because I'm years old, I get teary thinking about it. I think about the grit and the resilience, what it takes just to be on that boat in the first place.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We take so much of our modern day conveniences for granted. And that, again, the power of story, that story really shaped my siblings and I with a sense of grit and resilience. There was always something to fall back on and think about. Well, if grandmom and grandpa could do that, I can do this. But a quick story about graduating. So I went to Lafayette College. Not as many NCAA Cinderella stories to share there, but a great D1 school, I will say.
Absolutely.
So I graduated on May 12th, 1995. I waitressed for 2 weeks. For those listening who can remember Kathmandu on Delaware Avenue, back in the day next to Rock Lobster, I made some quick cash. I went on a camping trip with some friends, and we were in Acadia National Park in Maine. They literally dropped me off in New York City for my first day of work on June 5th.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Wow.
You didn't even get a month.
Not even a month. And as I said, self-motivated in that, I joke a little bit, but there was so much sacrifice. My father, Frank Messina, and his partner being founders of this business in the mid 80s, being an entrepreneur comes with a lot of risk. There's a lot of ups and downs. And, sending the three of us to college, loans and all, was not the easiest. And so, like I said, I joke, but I was very self-motivated to, grab that degree. So happy to get a job and get to work, truly.
And I was just going to say, I think you've touched on something too that I was thinking about in hearing that story, and so much of the immigrant, story, especially at that time, but is the idea of this stigma around asking for support, and you don't, there is no stigma around, there should not be a stigma around support, because sometimes you need it and you can then reciprocate by donating later, right?
Yes.
And I think that's so important for people to realize that if you want something and there's an availability, there's no problem in asking. So, and I think you kind of spoke to that, right? If he could give some money, even a little bit, your grandfather did, but also understood that, sometimes you do have to take out loans, or you do need to do stuff to get the goal right.
That's
for your children. So, and I don't know if either of you can speak to that as well in what you talk about with the scholarship fund, that positive element of what, the story you mentioned, Christine, you mentioned storytelling as a part of that. And I, as a marketer, find that super important, but do you ever touch on that idea that it's not a problem to ask for support? If you want this for your kids, this is available. How do you approach that?
Yes. And this is a success story. Jen, if you were not leading the podcast, I would still share this story. That very situation that you described, Mike, there's a great success story relative to the Catholic Star Herald. So our board president, Bill Curtis, who for a portion of time in his upbringing comes from a large family, several brothers and sisters, had a Catholic school education that was interrupted because of financial hardship. And so he shared that story in the Catholic Star Herald, I'm going to say sometime around, maybe it was 2020, 21,
Yes.
when the spring sprint, it was 21 because the spring sprint for scholarship had been launched. And a woman, an avid reader of the paper, read that story and said, okay, this scholarship exists so that doesn't happen. I've read this story about this board leader who had that happen to him as a young person and young student. His family was not able to recover from that. And having read that, it resonates with me, practicing Catholic with some disposable income, with the will to give. And she gave one of our largest gifts of that year. And Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there were 6 figures in that gift. It was quite generous. And
just under 6 figures. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so getting back to, what does it mean to encourage folks to ask for help? That story was shared to open up that door. It was a two-way communication. It was to let families know that this scholarship funds exists to provide that support. And it was an invitation to create awareness and let other people know, if this is something that you want to get behind, we're here for you. And this is why we're here. And this is how we help.
I love that you told that story, Christine, because it's a story within a story, and it's the people who need help, who could be anybody, especially these days. I mean, the other day I opened my fridge and there were eggs in there, and I yelled at my husband, "How much did you spend for those eggs?"
Yes.
Because let's all face it, no matter what economic status we're at, it's expensive right now.
Yes, it is.
So there's that angle of those who need some help, but there's also the angle of those who can say, "Oh, wait, I can help," and that helps them fulfill their Catholic or Christian calling in general to help others in need. So it's a spiritual boost for everybody involved in the way I look at it.
Yes. And Mike, I love that you spoke to removing the stigma of asking for help. And for the listeners who make their way around a few podcasts, and for those who might be familiar with Brene Brown, she shared in Dare to Lead or Unlocking Us, the notion that if we are someone who's always the giver of help, wanting to be the provider of support, but I'll speak from but I am hesitant to ask for help, then somewhere along the line, I'm judging the help that I give. And that was such a wake-up call for me. Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have 2 hands, one hand for giving and one hand for asking and receiving.
Yep. Yeah. And understanding, that you shouldn't try for something just because you don't think you can afford it. Especially when it comes to something important like Catholic education, right? I mean, if there's avenues for you to take, like the Scout Jersey Scholarship Fund or any other number of things that our schools can provide, that's given you an opportunity. It's not something that is a weakness. I just think again, I'm biased as the communicator for our Catholic schools, but there's no reason to give up on a Catholic education for your kids. I mean, there are avenues to take, and I think you're right. And then if you succeed, you can give back later as a good Catholic. I hope, with my kids' education, we continue to support the school after they're long gone, right? As alumni.
That's right.
Or the scholarship fund, through the scholarship fund. I mean, I'm a former track guy, so spring sprint, I can't not donate to something that's called a sprint,
Wonderful.
But you know what I mean? I think you're right. I don't, to me, I know I'm saying this like it's easy because I know it's not easy, but I just think there's something to be said for that, and understanding that you can give your kids a chance at a really great education if you just understand and ask. Like, there's no harm in asking the school what they can, how they can do it and how they can provide. And we, through social media, try to offer that, try to help to give the schools the wording. I think we just chatted about, as we're using this, even using the word scholarship makes it a little bit better. Right?
Yes.
Tuition assistance is much better than a handout or whatever people think it's going to be called. So I think that's so wonderful, your support on that. And drawing to Catholics education in general. Why do you feel that that's specifically an important endeavor to donate to, versus other causes that are out there?
Right. And Mike, I have the pleasure of speaking to donors throughout the year. And a lot of them, share just the positive experience that they had sending themselves going to Catholic school.
Yep.
One donor said she went, through 12 years. That was before kindergartens began, when it became 13 years. And then all of her children did. And she just said it really shaped them into the people who they are today. And now that she has some extra disposable income to give, she chooses to do that because she wants to help others have the opportunity. And I really think the way the schools go about it, because I sent 3 children through Catholic school, grade school, and high school, realized the way the schools encourage everyone to apply through fax tuition.
Yes.
So it's not even really that you have to go and say you're in need, because when you plug all that information in, the school's aware, and then they can identify who really could use the support.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other important part. And I think, is encouraging everyone, any listeners who are Catholic parents, when the school emails you and says, fill out the fax form, and you don't think you qualify, or you don't want to get set up in it, do it, because it can help. Every little bit helps. And it changes every year. They understand hardships come up. So it's not check the box and the same thing every year. It is truly a year to year. What do you need, and how can we help you? We want your child to be there and be a part of that family, that school family. So I think that's a great point, that there is some, we're talking about putting yourself out there, but there is some quote unquote anonymity to it, right? For the school, you're not necessarily being broadcasting specifics about that. So
we've talked a lot about the fund, which is fantastic. Can we talk a little bit about why supporting Catholic education is so important to both students and the community at large? Christine, could you attest to that?
Sure. So getting back to removing stigma, a new dialogue that fortunately has opened is removing the stigma of talking about mental health. And I think I've 2 boys, and I will disclose that they are in public school. I live in Haddonfield. They go through the Haddonfield public schools. So I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old boy. And among our family and friends raising children today, mental health is at the forefront of all of our minds. And so I think what's interesting is there's a push in the schools for social emotional learning. That's part of the curriculum in the public schools. That is wonderful. It's certainly something I'm supportive of. But to be direct, one of the key values and differentiators of being in a Catholic school is that spiritual pillar of their experience. And I can easily, dovetail the two, that a part of mental health is having faith, having good values, having connection, having the divine, having something that, you are always wrapped in love. You are always in a structure where you can choose good values. And I think that the mental health conversation and the spiritual conversation, for me, for our families, are intrinsically tied. And I think that is so important right now. And the dialogue that I'm hearing around the neighborhood is how families are really seeking to instill more of that. And so, faith and spirituality as fuel for mental health, I think, is just so incredibly important.
A couple months ago now, it was during Catholic Schools Week. And I happened to be at an elementary school, and there was a young boy in 2nd grade, and he had just transferred there. And I just happened to, kneel, because, I'm tall. I barely got back up after I kneeled. And just to ask him, what was the difference between the school he came to and the school that he was now at, a Catholic school. And he freely, I couldn't believe it for a 2nd grader. freely admitted and said he was being bullied at his other school so bad that it was actually dangerous for him to go back. And so his parents had enrolled him in this school, and he said he felt safe.
Yes.
Safe. That's what we're worried about nowadays. Is safety. And he felt safe because of the community. He felt accepted.
Jen, my emphatic yes is because I have a near identical story of a dear neighbor, older than second grade. So a seventh grader, my son's grade, they went to school together, from kindergarten. And, the silver lining is that she found her way to a Catholic school and is incredibly happy. It is unfortunate. It was because of bullying. This is a child she's an only child. So she's, milder, more tender, doesn't have the older brothers or sisters influencing. And so her maturity was just, really just developmentally perfect. Not into social media, not into TikTok, not trying to be older beyond her years, because she just naturally was who she was.
Right.
And that softness and that vulnerability, made her, unfortunately, the old mean girl paradigm. There's a reason why that movie exists. It's because those social constructs are a tale as old as time. And if you're vulnerable to that, it can have devastating consequences. As I said, the silver lining is she's in a Catholic school and is just so fulfilled, safe, happy, thriving. It's just a shame that was the genesis and the motivator for that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank God. Thank God. And, thank God that she got out of that toxic situation when she did, because she's at such that age where, those things stick with us for life. Yes. I still remember the boy who picked on me in 8th grade, that stuff scars you, Yes. So I'm so happy that at such a prominent time that's her personality blooming, that she got to move somewhere where she was accepted. Those are the stories that just give me shivers.
Yeah, those are great.
Yes.
And it's so funny. It's so interesting. I almost thought, Christine, you were somewhere here in the restaurant when you mentioned mental health, because the speaker for our principals today is a professor at Rowan, and her topic was on mental health in the schools. And one of the things she talked about, and I think this is what is partially what separates us for Catholic schools, is she mentioned, okay, principals, teachers, what do you do if you're stressed out? If you're having bad, and so many of them said, I go in my office and I pray. Right. Yes. And how many places can you confidently say that one in a room, or two, even in the school, identify that, our superintendent, Dr. Bill Watson, always mentions when he and I share, career paths where we were both in science museums and at different times. But, he mentions not being able to embrace that faith element in his work, and so that value for not only for the students, right? These two stories, and I can share stories of my own experience of that. And especially transferring to public school after so many years of Catholic school, but that just for the teachers and the the administration, that support system of other Catholics and other faith-filled people who they can go to, or they can just with themselves go to a chapel, because they're either across the street or maybe it's in the building that they can go and have a minute, right? With God. So I think that's another big part of it, is not only just that safety, but safety in your faith.
Yes. And in yourself.
Right.
In yourself,
yeah.
In that whole, that 7th grader that you're talking about, it's very possible that she's going to grow up to be a young adult and an adult who sees how others need that help too. So not only was she saved, or what I mean, but she's going to go influence somebody else in her life.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even have to be when she's an adult. It can be now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
And the confidence too. I always say accountability and confidence is something else the kids gain in Catholic school, right? That, and even equality in some respect, because we're all in the same uniforms, we're all on the same level, we're all held to the same standards. And so that's again, when you get older, you feel that, I jokingly talk about, in my own personal life about wearing a shirt and tie every day to work. Everyone's, in these casual work environments. I like getting dressed up, but that's Catholic school, right? And I was in a shirt and tie since I was in kindergarten, and some of that, but it also taught me responsibility and having all the elements ironed and ready to, and that was from Catholic school. That's definitely parenting and everything, but also because of what I had to do for Catholic school to be prepared every day. Right. And that's another thing that these kids that are getting these scholarships are getting from the schools that they're in. Right.
Yes.
So that's a good segue, because I was thinking, we haven't talked about, but, I was looking over some of our statistics, and 99% of Catholic high school students graduate, compared with the 84% graduate maybe for public high schools. So, we're talking about the spiritual angle, of course, and the confidence, but the education level as well. Mm-hmm. Stacy or Christine, can you relate to that? Or
yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, that's a 15% difference. And I can't even imagine in today's society, not having a high school education. It's pretty much becoming baseline that college is needed, or some trade school for sure. And my children who graduated from Catholic high school were very well prepared. So I could speak personally that, my one daughter was able to go and finish up 2 degrees in 4 years, which I forget what the national average is, but I think it's now they're looking at, okay, how many, the universities are all promoting how many graduate in 6 years, because it often takes students more than 4 years to get through. And then my son was a totally different focus, finance, and he graduated and passed all those Series 6, the finance exams, and he's out working as a financial planner now, and graduated last May. So, and my youngest is kinesiology major going for physical therapy, and she's doing excellent in her science classes. So it's really just great to see that. Aside from, of course, as a parent, I appreciated the spiritual, emotional, and it's fantastic to see that the education was also there as well, or that is a key component.
Stacy, I want to say, first of all, I cannot even pronounce any of your children's majors. That is amazing. I'm so glad you asked for success stories, because I just think we got a bunch right there. That is amazing, Stacy. And what I could add to that, this correlation between the graduation rates, again, I believe we're coming back to that spiritual strength and the quality of mental health and resilience. And so I'll just go back to my conversation with Dr. Fred Keating for a moment. Again, so grateful to him that he took an interest in the scholarship fund, and I can share a bit more how that manifests itself. But one of the conversations he and I had, and he's a part of a council of presidents of other universities and colleges, was post-COVID, this incredible impact where the freshmen are not prepared. Mm-hmm. And whether you're receiving tuition assistance or your parents are paying full boat, these kids are not making it through their freshman year in staggering numbers, and numbers that definitely show a post-COVID effect. Yeah. And so the clear correlation is that they're just not prepared, and they're not prepared mentally, spiritually, for the rigor, for the just life change. Life throws changes and curveballs at us. And that's why it's so important to do what we can in terms of an academic experience to build that spirituality, build that strength, so that as the child goes on, nothing's perfect. Like we're never at zero risk, and you're supposed to stumble and fall. But I think the point of this spiritual backbone is that you have something that you can lean into and feel fortified and dig deep and come back up from a fall or stumble and say, I've got this, God's got me, I've got me, my community's got me, and I'm gonna just go on and work it out. Whereas there's no shame, there's no judgment about folks who have interrupted their freshman year and have had to go back home or make some type of adjustment, that's all important too. But I think there's something to these statistics where the Catholic schools are graduating in higher numbers versus the public schools. And then furthermore, the statistic of these students who just aren't mentally, spiritually prepared for their freshman year of college.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, Christine, that, we benefited from the schools being open during COVID, when it was safe to come back. And so many of our parents, that we gained so many people during that time because they wanted their kids in a classroom. They wanted them to persevere through this, and I think that's helping a lot of them now. Right.
Oh,
and translating to the graduation rates, which have always been high for us, but especially now compared to other places.
Mike, you can best believe we were singing your victory song. We were telling that very important story. Again, it's the conversations that were happening in neighborhoods of families with young kids. Hey, I'm going to make the choice to pursue a Catholic education because during these COVID years, I want my child in person. I want them to have the social benefit. I want them to have the high quality in-person learning environment. And so it was easy for us to tell that success story and to inspire other people to get behind that and get behind it for the purpose of supporting the South Jersey Scholarship Fund and providing tuition assistance.
Exactly. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how people can support the South Jersey Scholarship.
That was going to be my next question. Good job,
well
Stacy.
Done, Stacy.
If you would like to support the South Jersey Scholarship Fund, go to southjerseycatholicschools.org/spring sprint. And there's a wealth of information there about different levels that you could support. And really, any donation is a wonderful donation to help students continue their Catholic education.
Absolutely. And through the magic of search engines, even if you don't get that / right, you will get there.
Yes.
And I will, as a shout out specifically to our office, you can always go to our Facebook page. We'll be posting information about this, articles from the Catholic Star Herald, as well as just information over these next couple of weeks. So if you go on Facebook, South Jersey Catholic Schools, Instagram, it's at South Jersey Catholic Schools, all one word. So always look to our resources as well. We want this. We love the support. We want to continue the support, and we thank Stacy and Christine and your team for helping us get the word out about these great scholarships. So on behalf of the school, they're all upstairs. I could take my thing and we can get personal thank yous, but I'll just speak for everyone in the group and say thank you on behalf of the office and of our principals, helping to support our schools, because they're our first, gateway to a Catholic education for our new families, and the scholarships help those new families. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I will, if I may, just give a call to action, like you talked about how good it feels to be in an environment where you can talk about faith and business. And so we have an awesome board. We're always looking to grow our members. It's a wonderful, like-minded community of folks that interweave, faith and business together for the purpose of getting the word out. And we welcome anyone interested in joining the board, reaching out. I think if you go to the website that Stacy described, you'll find your way to us, and we certainly welcome meeting you.
Well, thank you everybody for being on the podcast. Christine, it was just been a real pleasure to hear your energy, and thank you for sharing your stories, your personal stories, and the ones you've encountered so far. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Stacy, thank you as always. And I do feel pretty proud that I didn't butcher your last name this time. I think that's a first in 2 years.
Definitely.
Stacy, that is my birthday gift. That is my birthday gift. Yeah. And Mike, it was great to finally be on a podcast together.
Yes, I've had a wonderful time. Next time I'll just bring the wine. I won't be at a wine cellar. I'll just bring it in the office.
Finally.
And that way the location will be a little bit better.
And as always, everybody, thank you for tuning in to Talking Catholic Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.